Did you know that thousands of American women secretly helped win World War II, and no one knew about it for decades? These were the Code Girls, a hidden army of brilliant women breaking enemy codes and saving countless lives. This is their full, untold story, full of secrecy, courage, and brilliance. They were America's best-kept secret. In an era where women were expected to stay silent and supportive from the sidelines, over 10,000 stepped into a world of war, wires, and whispers, recruited with strange questions like, "Do you like crossword puzzles?" These young women were summoned to Washington with no idea what awaited them. Their mission? Break enemy codes, decode encrypted messages, and help win a war they were never supposed to fight. This is the story of the Code Girls, brilliant, determined women who cracked some of the toughest enemy ciphers during World War II. While the world applauded generals and soldiers, these unsung heroes were buried in silence, sworn to secrecy even from their families. For decades, their story was hidden in classified files, their impact erased from textbooks. But what really happened inside those locked rooms of Arlington Hall and the Naval Communications Annex? What did these women sacrifice to serve a nation that wouldn't acknowledge them? And why, after all they did no one know their names? Today, we're uncovering a story not just of war, but of courage, silence, and a legacy finally brought to light. This is the untold story of the Code Girls.
It all started with letters, plain, official-looking envelopes sent to college-educated women across the country. Inside, strange questions. Do you like puzzles? Are you good at math? Would you be willing to work for the government in a confidential capacity? No explanation, no return address, just a summons to something far bigger than they imagined. The year was 1942. America was deep in World War II, and Washington needed minds, brilliant, focused, tireless minds. So, the US government began quietly recruiting thousands of women from elite colleges like Wellesley and Barnard, and from small-town schools nobody had ever heard of. Many were math majors, language experts, or teachers. They were told to pack their bags and report to Washington, D.C., without telling anyone where they were going or why. When they arrived, they entered a world shrouded in secrecy. The Army and Navy code-breaking operations were scattered across hidden compounds like Arlington Hall and the Naval Communications Annex. There, these women trained in cryptography, intercepted enemy communications, and began the daunting task of breaking codes that were considered unbreakable. The secrecy was absolute. They couldn't discuss their work with roommates, boyfriends, even parents. They signed oaths that they'd keep their roles secret for life. If anyone asked, they were just secretaries or clerks. But beneath that cover story was a different reality, one where young women worked side by side with military intelligence officers, decoding messages that could change the course of the war. Many had never left their hometowns. Now, they were analyzing complex enemy communications, building massive code books, and running machines that would become the foundation for modern computers. There was urgency in every shift. Japanese messages needed decoding before fleets moved. German plans had to be intercepted before soldiers died. The women worked around the clock, often in cold, cramped rooms, lit by the soft hum of machines and the buzz of fluorescent lights. And yet, they endured, driven by purpose, bonded by secrecy, and inspired by the knowledge that their work, though invisible, was absolutely essential. They weren't just cracking codes, they were quietly becoming heroes, rewriting what was possible for women, for intelligence, and for history itself. Inside the buzzing war rooms of Arlington Hall and the Naval Communications Annex, The Code Girls got to work. It was unlike anything they'd ever known. Rows of women seated at long wooden desks, surrounded by machines with spinning wheels and endless reams of encrypted enemy transmissions. Their job? Transform chaos into clarity. They were decoding Japanese naval communications, German U-boat messages, and encrypted texts from every corner of the Axis powers. Using logic, pattern recognition, and pure determination, these women cracked systems the enemy believed were invincible. One of their most critical victories came in 1943, when American forces needed to intercept and destroy Japanese supply ships. Thanks to the Code Girls, Navy commanders received decrypted messages in time to plan devastating ambushes that saved thousands of lives. The pressure was immense. A single mistake could cost lives. Many worked 12-hour shifts, day and night, in a mental grind that left no room for error. There were no breaks for praise or celebration. Success meant silence. They could never reveal their role, even after a breakthrough. And it wasn't just the codes. Some women operated massive tabulating machines, early ancestors of modern computers. Others pieced together shredded documents, reconstructed destroyed communications, and translated enemy reports by hand. What they did with pencil, paper, and ingenuity laid the groundwork for future intelligence and cybersecurity methods. But beyond the work itself was the emotional toll. They read about attacks that could have been prevented had they broken a code sooner. They saw names of soldiers, convoys, entire missions, knowing what was at stake if they failed. They held that burden quietly. Some fell in love with fellow cryptographers, writing coded notes to each other in spare moments. Others cried in the stairwells during breaks, overwhelmed by the weight of war and isolation. But they all stayed, because despite the anonymity, they believed in the mission. No one outside knew the scope of their work, not the press, not the public, not even their families. The world kept turning, unaware that the fate of nations was being shaped by women in modest skirts and buttoned blouses, decoding history one cipher at a time. When the war finally ended in 1945, there were no parades for the Code Girls, no medals, no public thank you. The women who had helped shorten the war, save lives, and change the course of history were simply told, "You can never talk about what you did." And so, they didn't. Not to their husbands, not to their children. Many took the secret to their graves. While returning soldiers were hailed as heroes, these women quietly resumed civilian life, blending back into society as teachers, librarians, secretaries, and mothers, roles that gave no hint of the classified brilliance they once wielded. It wasn't just about humility, it was policy. They had signed strict confidentiality agreements. Breaking them could mean legal consequences, or worse, being branded a traitor during the tense Cold War years. So even in moments where they might have wanted to speak out, they stayed silent. Some of these women had cracked messages that turned the tide of major battles. Some had tracked Nazi spy rings. Others had helped locate Japanese supply lines that led to victorious ambushes. But at reunions and family dinners, they kept those stories locked away behind polite smiles and vague job descriptions. Imagine carrying that legacy alone. The pride, the trauma, the unspoken knowledge that you'd played a part in global history and could never say a word. Imagine reading a textbook and seeing no mention of your efforts, as if you'd never been there at all. For decades, the story of the Code Girls remained buried. Their names were absent from history books, their work hidden in sealed government files. They weren't forgotten because people didn't care. They were forgotten because no one ever knew. And yet, some of them held on to little mementos. A letter from the War Department, a photo outside Arlington Hall, a folded document they dared not show. They remembered in silence, hoping someday their contributions would surface. That day finally came, but for many, it was too late. They had passed on, their families unaware of the role these quiet women had played in shaping the world. Their story became a whisper across generations, until the files were declassified and the truth finally began to emerge. But during those long, quiet years, the Code Girls were heroes without recognition, carrying the weight of war in their hearts and the silence of history on their shoulders. In 1997, more than 50 years after the war had ended, something extraordinary happened. The documents about the Code Girls were finally declassified. For the first time, a hidden chapter of American history was cracked wide open, and with it came waves of surprise, awe, and disbelief. Children and grandchildren learned that their quiet, reserved mothers and grandmothers had helped defeat the Axis powers. Worn photos and cryptic notebooks suddenly took on new meaning. Families pieced together legacies they never knew existed. Some wept, some laughed in shock. All felt the enormity of the secret that had been buried for decades. Historians began documenting the role these women played. Books were written, oral histories were recorded, and slowly the Code Girls emerged from the shadows. Late recognitions and long overdue medals began to find their way into the hands of surviving veterans. Ceremonies were held, biographies shared, and former cryptanalysts were finally able to speak, many for the first time in their lives. For some, it was emotional. One woman confessed she had kept her service a secret, even from her husband of 50 years. Another said she had always downplayed her government job, calling it just clerical work, even though she had intercepted communications that likely saved lives. The declassification sparked a renaissance of interest in women's roles during wartime, not only in intelligence, but across all sectors. Schools began teaching their stories, museums created exhibits, and young women today draw inspiration from the quiet power of those who came before them. Women who solved impossible problems under unimaginable pressure and never asked for credit. Still, many questions remain. Why did it take so long? How many stories were lost to silence? And what else remains hidden in the classified vaults of history? But for the Code Girls who were still living, the recognition meant more than a medal. It meant validation. It meant being seen. After decades of invisibility, they were finally acknowledged as heroes. Not in the traditional sense of guns and glory, but in the truest form of courage, resilience, intelligence, and quiet patriotism. They had kept the world turning through one of its darkest hours. And now, at last, the world was finally turning to thank them. Today, their story is no longer a secret. The Code Girls are finally recognized as pioneers, not only of wartime intelligence, but of a movement that redefined what women could do in a world that never expected them to lead. Their fingerprints are on every branch of modern cryptography, cybersecurity, and data science. The early machines they operated became the ancestors of today's computers. Their analytical methods helped shape intelligence agencies like the NSA, and their determination laid the groundwork for generations of women who would follow them into fields once closed by tradition and bias. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the Code Girls isn't found in textbooks or museums. It lives in the quiet strength they modeled, the resilience to rise when called, the brilliance to solve the unsolvable, and the humility to serve without fanfare. In every line of encrypted code cracked, every message intercepted, every life saved without a name attached, they redefined what it meant to be a hero. They didn't ask for attention, they didn't need glory, but they deserve our deepest thanks. So today, we remember them not as footnotes in history, but as its authors, women who changed the world, one secret at a time. If you found this story as inspiring as we did, make sure to subscribe for more hidden histories, give this video a like, and share it to honor these incredible women.
A whisper in the shadowed frost, footsteps tread where lives were lost, a silent vow in the dead of night. He carries hope beneath the fight. The world lays fractured, cold and bare, yet courage rises in the air. Through burning towns and skies of gray, bravery walks the broken way. A heart